April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, a time to educate people about prevention. We're going on the record today with the people who can spot the warning signs and help defenseless children.
From WPBF 25, this is On the Record with Todd McDermott.
Good morning. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says every 9 minutes, authorities respond to a new case of child sexual abuse. And joining me now is therapist Brittany Grimshaw with Youth Services of Palm Beach County. Brittany, thank you for being here with us. Let's start with what your mission is and what the department can do for these victims of sexual abuse.
Thank you for having me, Todd. At the Youth Services Department, our mission is to empower families through provision of quality services, education, and access to resources for residents of Palm Beach County. I specifically work with the residential treatment and family therapy division. What that means is we look to accomplish that mission through offering free therapy services to families who have kids age 0 to 22 and who reside in the county.
So are these sessions, they include the child and the family at the same time?
They can. We adapt to meet the needs of the family at that time, whether it be individual therapy, family therapy, or even parent education to take place when the child is not there.
All right, let's discuss some of the warning signs of child sexual abuse. I know there are behavioral changes that may manifest themselves. There are also emotional behaviors you need to watch out for.
Absolutely. So we know that children are more likely to show that they've been exposed to abuse as opposed to tell. So it can be very important to pay attention to what those behavioral or emotional signs could be. My rule of thumb when talking to parents is looking for a change in behavior. So parents are the experts on their kids at the end of the day. They spend the most amount of time with them. They know the most about the nuances of their behavior. So if a parent is to see a child make a drastic change in behavior, whether that be mood related or with their behaviors, that can be a sign that they may have been exposed to abuse and it is time to initiate a conversation.
Can you give parents some idea of what some of these changes in behavior might be? Something specific they might notice? What might that be?
Yeah, so specifically for child sexual abuse, it can look like a regression of behaviors. So children who previously were able to do things independently now need their parents to go with them to do something. Or children who were potty trained now wet the bed or have nightmares. It also looks like change in appearance. So if a child has long hair and all of a sudden cuts it all short or starts wearing baggier clothing or gaining or losing weight, that can be a sign that something has happened. Most importantly, we look at the developmental age of the child. So based on a child's age, what should their knowledge of sexual behaviors and language be? And if a child is using or demonstrating those sexual behaviors or language that is not appropriate with their age, that could be a sign that they were exposed to it in some shape or form.
Well, let's talk about talking with the child. Obviously, the first order of business is to ease their fears, to get them to open up. How do we go about doing that?
It is a difficult conversation to have. No one wants to think about child abuse happening. But when coming into that conversation, how a parent or adult responds is vital in ensuring the future safety of a child. So to kind of sum it up in 2 words, you want to come into the conversation with care and with urgency. So there are many barriers to a child actually disclosing the experience of sexual abuse. So as the adult that is speaking with them, you want to be sure to validate their concerns, to verbalize, I believe you, and thank you for trusting me with this. And then with acting with urgency, you want to be able to show a child that they made the right decision in depending on an adult for this conversation. So this can mean guiding or supporting the child in taking those next steps to find a solution, whether it be reporting to the Department of Children or Families or engaging with services like the Youth Services Department or the Children's Healing Institute to connect them with professionals to support them in their journey.
And it's an old saying, but in some ways, is this a situation where if you suspect a child has been victimized, really it's the feeling, if you feel something is wrong, you should follow those instincts and look to see what the child has to say?
Professionally and personally, I would agree with that. Trust your gut. So our intuition is made up of experience and information. And if you're the person that has the most experience with that child and the most information on a child, it's safe to say you have a pretty good idea of what's going on. So if you notice changes or you have a feeling that something could be going on, it could mean the world to a child and make a difference in their safety to offer space of comfort and safety to have that conversation, as opposed to relying on a child to come to you to initiate it.
All right, Brittany Grimshaw with Palm Beach County Youth Services. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, next, the organization is at the forefront of helping victims when On the Record returns.
You're watching On the Record on WPBF 25.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Amanda Altman, Executive Director of Christie House, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fighting child abuse and child sex trafficking. They also work on solutions and you help the victims. Let's talk first about how Christie House began and your mission.
Sure. Well, Christie House was founded in 1995, and the reason was a tragic one, actually. Shortly after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, City of Miami police detectives found Christie. She was a 9-year-old little girl who was 8 months pregnant. Her stepfather had been molesting her for years, and as a result, she gave birth when she was 10 years old, something that is incredibly difficult to imagine. So Christie House was later founded by a group of community activists who were really charged with coming up with an agency that could coordinate all of the services for children who are victims of child sexual abuse. Today, our mission really is all about prevention, healing, and justice. We want to prevent these atrocities from happening to kids in the first place. If we can't prevent it, then we're going to heal it, and we're also going to seek justice for our children.
You mentioned Miami. I know you're South Florida based. How
Yes.
far does your reach go in serving people?
So we're Miami based, but we also focus on Monroe County, so the Upper Keys and the Middle Keys, all the way up into Palm Beach. We are a children's advocacy center. Palm Beach County actually doesn't have a dedicated children's advocacy center, so we will see a lot of children from there. In fact, some of Jeffrey Epstein's initial victims were treated at Christie House.
Can you tell me how you help children deal with what they have been through at your organization?
Absolutely. So one of our goals is to prevent any re-traumatization and re-victimization. And so at Christie House, we try to provide as many services as possible for the kids in one place. One of the things we do, as I mentioned earlier, is coordinate all of the agencies that are helping the kids. So every single Friday, we bring together all of the agencies, whether it's law enforcement, state attorney's office, DCF, Child Protection Team, and we staff the cases so that we're making sure that the children are getting all of the services they need, but only getting those services one time. Christie House itself also provides all of the mental health and case coordination those children need. And so we have about 20 full-time mental health therapists on staff who are providing the best evidence-based mental health modalities that are available, and we're doing advocacy for our children and families. Whatever else those children need to heal and whatever those families need to be stable and secure and safe are what we're going to provide our kids.
You mentioned that the mission has evolved over the years, and prevention is part of this, both the victimization of child sexual assault and child sex trafficking. what is the prevention work that you can do at Christie House?
We have 5 full-time prevention education specialists on staff, and their entire job is to be out in the community. They are in the school systems, primarily in Miami-Dade County, talking to the children about how to keep themselves safe, talking to the teachers and the counselors about what to look for and how to keep the kids safe, what to do if a child discloses, and talking to parents about how to keep their kids safe, what the signs are in case they notice something. And really, we're out there talking to anybody who will listen to us. The kids are incredibly important. There's great research out there that shows that if a child has even one prevention education course regarding abuse, they're far less likely to be assaulted before their 18th birthday. And so it's critical that we're out there speaking to the children, but also to the parents and the adults who can keep these children safe and who can report if something's happened to a child.
And this leads me to a question. I know you have some success stories that you can share with people of what you've done.
We have many success stories, fortunately. Some of my favorites are simply the ones where the kids go on and they lead normal lives. Recently, we had a young lady reach out to a therapist who had helped her at Christie House, and she thanked the therapist for everything she had done for her and then told her she had just graduated cum laude from University of Florida with a criminal background, and she was going to go on to become a psychologist. I mean, what could be better than that? This woman is going on to live a healthy, productive life, and she wants to give back because of the services she received at Christie House.
And I was wondering, because your organization goes all the way back to 1995, have public perceptions changed regarding these types of crimes?
I think they have. I think that, number one, it is definitely not as difficult. There's not as much of a stigma attached for children and families to be able to come forward, which is critical. You know, most of the time, if a child discloses, in fact, I would venture to say it's close to 100% of the time, if a child discloses that sexual abuse has happened to them, it's true and we need to believe them. And so it needs to be comfortable for a child to be able to disclose that. And the stigma around it has changed. It's also changed for adults and families. They're able to come forward if something has happened, which is really critical to being able to help these kids. So yes, I think it has changed. I think, number two, we're also seeing that the laws are catching up with us. And so cracking down and really prosecuting the individuals who are perpetrating these horrible, heinous crimes is definitely increasing, and we're seeing great success in putting these people in jail.
And that is real progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It goes so far to helping these kids heal. Justice is a critical part of healing. If we're able to provide that, we're really able to further help the kids.
All right. The nonprofit is Christie House. Amanda Altman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it so much, and the work you do.
Thank you.
Next, meet a woman who works as an attorney representing victims of sexual assault in civil court. Joining me now is Kimberly Wald of the American Association of Justice's Child Sex Abuse Litigation Group. She's a member of the National Crime Victim Bar Association and works as a lawyer representing victims of sexual assault. And Kimberly, first, thank you for joining us today to talk about this. You fight for victims in civil court. What's your goal as a lawyer in these cases that you take?
So our goal is to hold whoever is accountable. You know, there is both a criminal and a civil justice system. In the civil justice system, we can actually make change. We can change laws. We can change systemic problems in institutions through lawsuits, through going to the legislature and actually helping these victims prepare through the process, helping them emotionally get through this, going to their physicians, and helping them also be advocates for other victims in the community.
When you are approaching a case like this and you have to talk with a family of a victim of child sexual abuse, what are the discussions like? What advice do you give them? What are those talks like?
So those are obviously very difficult talks to have with any potential client. And, you know, us at our law firm and many attorneys that handle these cases, we have a trauma-informed practice. And the last thing we as attorneys want to do is have the clients go through that process as they're explaining these cases to us. So we really listen to the clients, see what they want from this process, and kind of explain to them how the process is going to work and how we can help guide them step by step and really be their advocates. Because when they come to us, they're in such a vulnerable position that they need to know that someone's going to be by their side fighting with them every step of the way.
And I'm sure it can be difficult for some of these families to realize or come to grips with the fact that their child has been sexually abused.
Absolutely. It is very difficult, especially if you're a parent in that situation. There's a lot of guilt, unfortunately, that is associated with that. And we help coach the parents and the guardians through that as well, that predators are out there and they are very good. They're very good at what they do. That's how they get away with these crimes. And so you're not necessarily a bad parent. You're not necessarily doing anything wrong if this happens to your child. The fact that you're reaching out and getting help, that is the most important thing.
And I know you represent these families and the young victims in civil court with lawsuits filed against school boards or districts, private entities, summer camps. Beyond all that, maybe through these cases even, what can be done, you touched on it, to help these abuse victims, but then also help prevent abuse further down the line?
What we've learned is in the civil court system, we really can make a difference, because once an organization has to reach into their own pocketbooks, they then all of a sudden start making changes. They'll start vetting their counselors or their volunteers more. They're going to create actual guidelines and programs to have training for their employees. We also are able to help our victims advocate in the legislature, both on a state and a federal level, to have some additional protections put in place. Recently in Florida, we were able to codify sex trafficking, and in Florida now there is actually a civil lawsuit that you can bring on behalf of a victim of sex trafficking for adult theater. So there's a lot you can do on the civil aspect, both by the financial gain and also by helping advocates in the legislature and actually changing the laws that we all abide by every day.
Can we talk a little bit about predators themselves, maybe including those targeting young victims gravitating to some organizations, groups, teams, even religious institutions seeking their victims? Why is that? I mean, obviously it is a very thought out process for these criminals.
Unfortunately, based on our experience, the reason they're gravitating towards those is because it's an easy target. And it's horrible to say that, but it is. You have a group of very vulnerable members of our society, children, that are gravitating towards these institutions, the Boy Scouts, the troubled teen camps, the other religious institutions, and they're seeking that help. They're seeking that guidance. And predators recognize that. They understand that, and they want to go to a place that they can get away with their crime. That's why they are really interested in some of these organizations, because they have targets there that unfortunately are very easy to pick off because we don't have enough protections put in place. And that's really our goal, is to put those protections to raise awareness so that we can end the systemic epidemic really in our community and our society.
And let's address that as the final question, and that is the next steps here. As a litigator, what else do you see that can be done? You've mentioned some of the steps that have been taken, but as someone who's there on the front lines in civil court on these cases, what else would you want to see now?
Well, what I want to see is more awareness. What we're doing right now is we're talking about it. These type of crimes, these type of horrible assaults cannot just be talked about behind closed doors. We need to be on the front lines, on Capitol Hill, up in Tallahassee, up in DC, fighting for these victims, both in and out of the courtroom, because if we don't, we're going to see history repeat itself. And enough is enough. It is time now to take a stance and to be vocal, and that is what is going to cause a meaningful change in this horrible epidemic.
Hopefully through your work, and maybe even a little bit through this program today, we'll help move that along. Attorney Kimberly Wald, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. I want to close here by first thanking you for making this part of your morning. As always, we encourage you to join our discussion each and every Sunday right here at 10 a.m. Until then, you can watch this morning's On the Record program and every episode on our website, that's WPBF.com, and on our free WPBF 25 News app. Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien is next. We hope you have a great Sunday. See you again next week.